Bitcoiners, welcome back to Bedwatch. It's me and Ansel. I hear you guys on Twitter poking at us whenever we miss a week, so we're trying to be better about getting a show in every week, but we're busy. We're producing a lot of content. Ansel's producing weekly newsletter all the time. He has a great community. Bitcoin Magazine is obviously doing what Bitcoin Magazine does, but we are here with an amazing lineup of topics to cover. Ansel dropped an awesome article on Bitcoin Magazine, kind of dissecting the causes behind like this mid-cycle correction. People are kind of confused. They forget that bull markets also have some corrections, and they think that it's up all the time until the blow off top. So Ansel dives into a bunch of the kind of like key narratives and things that have been going on the last few months. Let's just get right into it, Ansel. This is a great article. You break down a lot of things. After we're done talking about the article, we're also going to dive into like central banks and what the heck they've been doing. A lot of stuff has been, they've been very active the last few months, especially. So a lot to get into in this episode. Ansel, what's up, my man?
Not much. Yeah, this article was fun to write. I kind of broke it off of a larger macro post that I have on Bitcoin and markets, and really dove in deeply into just the Bitcoin side of macro that happened in Q2. But I pulled out three narratives that when I started plotting like the dates on the chart, I was like, oh my gosh, they all like overlapped and came together right at the big decline. And so I said, there has to be something to this. And so I kind of wrote about it in this piece.
Yeah, so I mean, let's jump into these narratives. I guess I could just list them off. You got GBTC unlock, mining ban in China, and then obviously Taproot. So let's start with GBTC.
Okay, so GBTC, people probably are familiar with their unlocking process. So accredited investors can buy new shares from GBTC, and that forces Grayscale to go out and buy Bitcoin on the open market or over the counter or whatever. They had to go out and buy Bitcoin. And during times when the GBTC shares have a premium, that creates a arbitrage opportunity for these large accredited investors to buy new shares, wait the 6 months until the shares can be sold on the secondary market, and then sell them for that premium. And that unlock period, people track. So people track exactly how many shares are going to be unlocked on this date, on this date, on this date. And it just happened to be like in May and June, some large unlocks started happening. So I'm going to share my screen real quick if I can. So here's my chart. GBTC premium turns into a discount here in middle of February. And then in the beginning of April, they start having these large unlock periods. And then they continue doing these large unlock periods in a discount. So there is no pressure to go out and buy Bitcoin on the market by Grayscale. And it ended up right here on July 17th was the very last one. There's a lot of talk around this, the ending of this process, or at least the very large way that it was going to end. It was going to be the largest unlock ever for GBTC shares. And a lot of people were saying this was going to be a huge dip. But as you can see, that kind of decreased the uncertainty in the market, I think, around this particular behavior. And so then the price was able to come up after that. We have these other three overlapping periods, which is the China mining ban. Hash rate peaked here roughly May 9th, I believe, or May 8th, right before the big decline. And then it bottomed out here on June 22nd or something like that. So I just highlighted that area. And then the third in orange here is the Taproot. Taproot speedy trial began right like May 1st, I believe. And it ended up, it already got, locked in there June 12th, I think it was. So, but all three of these narratives, they combined right at the time when the largest price drop happened. And I thought that was pretty significant.
So I remember that the Chinese mining ban and Taproot kind of were at the same time. And I remember this was like right after the week immediately after the Bitcoin conference. But I tweeted that this was the most historic week in Bitcoin history between Taproot being activated and this massive exodus of mining and hash rate from China, it was absolutely incredible. So, um, I mean,
I should have
it's
put an arrow
amazing to see it on the
for
chart. And to everyone listening just on podcast, go to YouTube and check it out. Go to the article, check out Ansel's chart. It really is incredible, the boxes and how you put it all into perspective with the price and seeing how the price reacts against all of those different events.
Yeah, and once everything led up here, I think well, what I said was all of these individual different narratives, they affected different parts of the market. So GBTC affected accredited investors and high net worth individuals, institutions, and things like that. The Chinese mining ban obviously affected miners, but also that was a big uh, all in the headlines. So that affected retail investors as well. And then the speedy trial and the taproot kind of affected the hardcore Bitcoiners. So I think all of these things affected different parts of the market. And yeah, it's just amazing that all this uncertainty was caused during that time. And as soon as all these things were over, now the price, it felt that it could rise again. So, yeah, now that we have a new narrative with this infrastructure bill, but right now I think it's still in its early stages. And so once these things have wrapped up, now I think the price can rise.
All right, yeah, and let's. I mean, again, amazing to just kind of see all of these things layered against themselves. Um, do we want to continue kind of talking about, any of these? Do we want to dive into the mining ban a little bit more, or how do you want to take this?
Well, I just recommend that people go and read the article. We don't have to hash through each individual point made. I want to jump into this Fed news, the new standing repo facility, and stuff like that.
Let's do it.
Okay, so people are familiar with probably the reverse repo situation from the Fed. They have over $1 trillion now, or back and forth over $1 trillion, under $1 trillion of reverse repos going on every night. And that is where people or big banks and large institutions, large financial entities, they can take their cash and lend it to the Fed overnight. And the Fed will give them collateral, which is, it can be T-bills, it can be any sort of treasury. And it has an interesting way of turning like a 30-year treasury into an overnight Fed liability. So it can turn all of these longer duration treasuries into overnight liabilities, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the demand just keeps getting larger and larger. There's a lot of pundits out there like Zoltan and others that say that this could get up to 2 trillion a night before it starts easing. And we'll have to see. There is not really a clear insight on what this means. We do know that it is a sign that the system itself is fragile, and we see a lot of other signs of, like T-bill rates and other things being so low that we know that the system is fragile right now. And some other statistics are starting to turn over and come back down again, roll over and show like at least a pause in the reflation recovery, if not a complete reversal of that. So there is a lot of fragility in the market. This reverse repo points that out, and it just keeps getting larger. So we'll have to see where it goes.
So your take is that we're seeing more and more fragility, and that probably means that we're about to see a spout of volatility, and we may see a little bit of a reckoning and demand for future Fed action or even greater Fed action. Is that what you kind of make of the situation?
Yeah, risk is increasing. And so that is why rates are decreasing, because as risk goes up, people want to go to the most trusted asset out there, and that is the U.S. Treasury, the most pristine collateral. And so we see falling rates in that regard. Even though the Fed is trying to keep these T-bills over 5 basis points, because they came out, when was that? I think it was in April, and they announced that they were going to do this reverse repo with at 5 basis points instead of 0. But these treasury bills are still trading consistently below 5 basis points. So that means that there's a massive amount of demand in the market that the Fed isn't even capable of servicing. It's not even acting as a floor, this 5 basis points that they're giving on the reverse repo. So another very interesting development was this last week at the meeting, the Fed meeting. Powell came out and talked about well, it wasn't Powell, it was just a press release that came out saying that they're going to start a standing repo facility. Now, this is not reverse repo. So this would be the traditional where the financial entities or large institutions come with collateral and then get cash from the Fed. So the opposite of what's going on in the reverse repo. And they say they want to do this standing facility. It's kind of confusing because there is no demand right now. So there's $1 trillion in reverse repo happening, $0 in regular repo happening, but now they want to do a standing repo facility. So it's a lot of people are trying to come up with a lot of different theories. I have my own of why they're trying to do this, but yeah, that goes into effect October 1st, and perhaps they are looking at around that time for more of that volatility and risk to be realized at that time.
Okay. I mean, we already know this. Like the Fed has dug itself, all central banks and all governments have dug themselves into a position that they can't dig themselves out of, right? There's no way to get out of this hole and they're only digging further. So, seeing them again doing things to try to help is not surprising. Again, I'd be interested to hear your theories on, why they're doing these things and how the time works out. But in addition to that, the Fed and other folks in the government are casting blame on Delta, right? Like coronavirus is damaging and all this kind of stuff. I'm not an epidemiologist, but both you and I are known to be relatively skeptical of the mainstream narrative, at least when it comes to this stuff. Again, like I know people that have gotten corona and it seems like it was nasty. But at the same time, I think that this is a much more complex thing happening. Again, it seems that corona is the scapegoat for central bankers and politicians here. Do you want to kind of jump into some of these statements?
Okay. Yeah. So Kashkari, he came out and is blaming Delta for there's going to be some labor market weakness. But of course, the virus itself is not what's causing the labor market weakness. I think we can agree on that. And I think everybody would agree on it that it's not the virus, it's the response to the virus. It's the government response and the lockdowns and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about with the Fed. Well, another thing they did do in their minutes, they took out the COVID, a line about COVID. Let's see if I can find that real quick. So the statement the Fed issued after its latest policy meeting said that ongoing vaccinations were helping the economy, but it dropped a sentence it had included after its previous meeting that said those vaccinations have reduced the spread of COVID-19. So I think that's kind of interesting. They took out that the one statement that's saying that the vaccine is actually helping the case numbers, but they did leave in that the vaccines are helping the economy. So kind of a mixed bag on that regard. Should we get into China?
Yeah,
Should we just
let's
jump right
do
in?
it. Let's just do it.
Okay, so you'll have to tell me what you think about this. I haven't dug super deep into this, but we've heard a ton of news out of China, starting with banning of Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin trading. Then they started banning IPOs that were going to happen in the United States. Now this Didi, which I think is Uber over there in China, they and some educational apps, they have been pretty much nationalized, I think, over there. And now, just today or yesterday, Tencent came out and there was some regulations on them saying that they they are going to be limiting video game playing somehow in China because they equated it to spiritual opium. Um, there's a lot of like these draconian authoritarian measures coming out of China right now. Also, it does coincide with um, some slower growth, some stock market volatility, and they also are finally releasing some COVID numbers. So we all know that there was no chance, pretty much, that China had 100 COVID cases a day, and it was right at 100 for over a year. Now they're starting to come out with more lockdowns in Wuhan and starting to admit to these more COVID numbers. And so I think this might be a play for them to once again blame this virus for some of this economic weakness that's coming about in China, and most likely due to their authoritarian crackdown. So what's your what's your take on all that?
So, I mean, again, China is one of the areas where me and you really agree and kind of both have contrarian takes. I was just on POV Crypto last night, and David Hoffman was just talking about how incredibly powerful the Chinese central bank digital currency is going to be, the digital yuan, and how amazing it's going to be and how its network effects are going to spread it. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not going to even ship. And centralized top-down decision-making authoritarians will fuck up. It is inevitable. They don't have all the information as the free market, and they will fuck up. And I think that like I'm looking at a list of 3 areas where they fucked up majorly recently. Fucked up by, even if they wanted to control Bitcoin mining, they should have allowed Bitcoin mining to thrive in China so that way they can co-opt it, not kick it out, not unplug those machines, not displace all of that stuff. So if they really wanted to support the digital yuan, they would need to take out its greatest competitor, which is Bitcoin, the free money alternative. And they didn't. If anything, they made Bitcoin significantly stronger, and they released a lot of their leverage, or that's how it seems. Now let's talk about banning all these different things and nationalizing all these apps. Again, they're leaning back into bad tendencies. They're leaning into marginalizing their companies, marginalizing profits, and marginalizing their citizens. And, these citizens aren't going to forget what it was like before, and maybe they're going to comply and bend down forever. But I truly do think that, they're making mistakes here, right? Like these policies, they're anti-free market, anti-choice, anti-fun, liberty, and life for their people. And I think it's going to bite them in the ass in a long enough time frame. And then lastly, like you could blame China for everything that's happened with coronavirus, whether it's creating coronavirus or whether it is not saying anything about coronavirus or trying to contain it at the beginning and downplaying it and letting people travel, or whether it's, showing governments the playbook of locking down. Like, no matter what narrative you believe, like there's multiple areas where I think you can blame China. So we're just looking at 3 areas where you and I, unfortunately, were vindicated in our bearishness on the CCP's ability to be competitive, not fuck up, and continue to let its people be happy and fruitful and thriving. I think that they're really going in a negative direction now.
Yeah, no conversation of China is complete without mentioning the demographic disaster that is about to happen there. Over the next 50 years, I think they're going to lose 100 million or 200 million. I can't remember the exact number now. I think it's by 2100, it's going to be 700 million people supposedly in China. So they're going to have a demographic collapse. And so now, right as this demographic collapse is happening, they're going to, crack down on IPOs, fintech, educational apps, Bitcoin mining. I mean, that's going to crash productivity that much more right at the time when you need to increase your per capita productivity, right? And so I think it's I don't know. Any way you slice it, to me, this China looks like it's headed very quickly, and it's devolving very, very quickly in the grand scheme of things into some sort of collapse scenario or civil war or something like that. Just remember the Soviet Union in 89, 88 was being praised as still going to take over the world. They were still going to dominate the United States. They were still going to do all this stuff. And then just within 2 years, they're gone. They were gone. And that was like the top academics at the time saying that the Soviet Union was still had the better system 2 years before they collapsed. And I think when I look at the news headlines and I see all this stuff about the Thucydides trap and about how China is going to dominate the future and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, they can't even control their claimed territory with Taiwan, and they barely got back Hong Kong, and they lost a lot of their reputation doing that. And they have a genocide going on, and XYZ, all of these things that it sounds exactly like I think what the Soviet Union must have felt like back in 88, 89. So yeah, that's all I got to say about China.
All right, Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about our newest sponsor. This show is brought to you by Ledn.io. I have been super, super impressed with the guys over at Ledn. I've actually known the co-founders, Adam and Mauricio, for a very long time. I've had the pleasure to watch them build Ledn up from a tiny, tiny startup to now a super impressive institutional grade Bitcoin and crypto lender. Y'all, I'm so impressed with these guys. They are offering some of the best rates out there. I don't think anyone even comes close to touching them. You can get 6.1% APY on your first 2 Bitcoin that you deposit into Ledn interest accounts, and you can get 8.5% US on USDC deposits. I mean, I know all the competitors. They're not even close. If you're going to put your crypto and your Bitcoin into an interest account, Ledn is by far the best. And on top of that, like I said, these guys are hardcore Bitcoiners, and they know the products and the services that Bitcoiners want and appreciate. They came up with B2X. It allows you to put your Bitcoin in, they leverage it up, and you can, with one click of the mouse, get twice the exposure to Bitcoin. So if you're super bullish, Ledn has you covered with a super, super easy way to get leverage with B2X. And then on top of that, they know that Bitcoiners care about your reserves. They know that Bitcoiners don't like under reserved and not full reserved financial institutions. So they are pushing the frontier in transparency in the digital asset lending space. And they are the first digital asset lender to do a full proof of reserves and proof of attestation through a Mariano LLC, a public accounting firm. So the Ledn guys, they know what Bitcoiners like. They are legit. I encourage you guys to check them out. Do your own research and go to Ledn.io. That is LEDN.io and learn more. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you guys about The Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is a new premium newsletter from the Bitcoin Magazine team in conjunction with my man, BTCization, Dylan LeClaire. Dylan is such a multifaceted and wide-ranging analyst. He does everything from on-chain analytics to macro analysis to hash rate and all that kind of good stuff. He does it all. He breaks down everything that's happening every single day with his daily dive. He's going to dive into what is happening in the market that day. So that way you don't have to pay attention to Twitter. You don't have to pay attention to anything else. You can just pay attention to the deep dive, and he has you covered. And at the end of the week, guess what? You get a weekly recap. And at the end of the month, hey, we have a freaking report, a beautiful PDF breaking down all the activity of that entire month, what it means for Bitcoin, what you can expect moving forward. The Bitcoin market is going to moon. We are here to make sure that we maximize your stack. Go to members.bitcoinmagazine.com to sign up today. And if you use promo code BITS, you can get 1 month for free. So again, the deep dive, I've been checking it out every day, and you should too. Back to the show. I mean, I think on a long enough time horizon, the fundamentals matter. First principles matter. And centralized top-down decision-making, especially in an authoritarian setting, like they fuck up. They do not have as much information as the market. And if that centralized top-down decision-making is inherently anti-market, is contrary to the market, is trying to dominate the market, like they will be crushed in a long enough time horizon. And I think, the demographic disaster is trying to control the population, right? Like, hey, they had a one-child policy for a long time. So, on a long enough time horizon, they're getting fucked. That's just one example. And I think we're about to see compounding examples of that with China. Again, you and I agree. We're both contrarians here. I think I've learned a lot from you in terms of how to think about these first principles anyway. So, I guess before we wrap it up, though, let's talk about the U.S. a little bit. Like, we're seeing the U.S. kind of return to, let's just call it centralized top-down decision-making tendencies, authoritarian tendencies. But at the same time, like I personally am kind of bullish on the US's ability to resist because of freedom of choice, states' rights, the ability to take your assets and your property and move to a jurisdiction that is meaningfully different. Do you have any kind of comments around that and what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, so I just try to remind myself about the fourth turning. This is a multi-generational cycle that we're going through right now, and it feels like the end of the world. The fourth turning always feels uh, very devastating, and like things can not, will never get better. But it's just a few short years later, things are back to normal and growing again. And so I think I just like to keep that in mind, that these things are temporary. And also, my whole thesis for the geopolitics and macroeconomic landscape of the world is that globalization is going to decrease, and the US is still going to be the premier economy in the world. And so most capital is going to want to find its way into US markets. Um, and so the US is probably one of the better places to be in the world. Many other places have been racked throughout history with warfare. The US, yes, we've had the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, and some other minor wars, but nothing to the extent, say, of Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, these places are constantly at war, and they probably will continue to be. And so I wouldn't want to be in Eastern Europe. I wouldn't want to be in the Middle East or Central Asia, really, probably in the next 50 years, because I think as we deglobalize, these old animosities are going to come back to the forefront and probably cause major problems elsewhere. So the US, for me, I'm still on this North American Renaissance. I'm still on this U.S. boom, and I think after the fourth turning is complete, it's going to feel like a golden age here in the United States.
So, I mean, tell me about like, let's talk about. So, the fourth turning is like this idea that there's four generations, and they kind of have their own archetype and they cycle, right? And like the original generation is kind of like the figurehead and the dominator of that cycle. And then by the end, everything that generation has built and relies on is kind of completely decrepit and needs to be burnt down and replaced. And they need to pass off their value to the newest younger generation. And that's kind of like this four generation cycle, and we're at that point, right? So here we are millennials or Gen Xers, and the boomers have held on to power, and everything that they've built has been for serving them. And now they need to pass it on, and they need to pass on their governments, and they need to pass on their wealth and their value and all that stuff. And there's just a massive friction in that passing point. And it seems as though these dinosaurs in Congress and in the Senate, they want to protect big banks. With this infrastructure bill, they want to attack Bitcoin. They fear Bitcoin, if you will, and they're taking something that's bipartisan, is a big kind of non-issue for Bitcoin, and they're wrapping Bitcoin into it as part of like trying to achieve an agenda. Do you have any comments about this infrastructure bill in the U.S. and I guess what's happening there? Bitcoin Magazine has definitely been front and center with that conversation.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I saw you talking about it on Telegram, and so then I jumped to your guys' coverage, and I learned some stuff from some of the. You had a representative on there. I can't remember his name now, but he did an interview almost
Warren
immediately.
Davidson.
Yeah, and so most of the facts that we know, I think you guys have done a really good job covering it. I guess the language has changed now, so it's less onerous than previously, but we don't know. I don't even know if how much of a chance this thing has to pass both houses before it goes to the president. Because I think Pelosi wants to have a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill, and this one's only roughly a trillion. So, how are they going to get these things, coordinated before they go to the president to sign? I don't know what the chances are that it even does happen. So I I don't know.
So just to put things into perspective, what Nancy Pelosi wants, Apple is a $2.4 trillion market cap company. So this bill, as is already a half an apple. So I don't think that this bill is going to produce half an apple's worth of value to the world, not even close. But Pelosi doesn't even want just that. Pelosi wants 1.5 apples, right? Pelosi wants to take Apple and smash it in with Google and spend that money, right? Like, this is, I just want to put this into perspective. Like, that is the amount of money that she's asking for. The only way to think about these things is to put it into context of other things of that size. And the biggest company in the world is $2.4 trillion. And Pelosi wants to just spend 3 point whatever trillion dollars. I mean, let's just put this into perspective.
Well, you can
Then on
also
top
look
of
at
that,
it.
they want to claim 38 billion from crypto and potentially change that entire market in order to do so. It seems like foul play to me, right? It's a drop in the bucket in the numbers that they're talking about, and they want to completely potentially crush an industry, a burgeoning industry in this country. So while I am bullish on the West, like, you see this kind of crap and you're like, come on, boomers, like, just get out of the way, please. Like, you're about to die anyways. Like, come on, get out of the way.
Well, we can add to that. We do know about how much growth we get per dollar of spending, right? And so if it's roughly 3 to 1, so you have to spend $3. The federal government has to spend $3 to get $1 in growth. And so if we're saying this is going to be a $3 trillion stimulus package, that means we're going to get 1 trillion in growth out of it, and that just is that worth it, right? Probably not. To the Bitcoin side of the Bitcoin discussion, yeah, I think it's interesting that this was anonymously added. This Bitcoin language was anonymously added to an amendment, and it's happening at this certain time in history that China is falling. I don't know. My huge conspiracy theory tinfoil hat is that China influence had something to do with this language.
I mean, I don't know. We have a very strong. Warren Davidson is saying that this is coming from the Treasury, and the Treasury is part of the executive, and the Treasury is led by Janet Yellen, who's been firmly anti-Bitcoin, pro central bank digital currency, pro, let's just call it top-down, influencing the market. And I would say that is following very much a very similar Chinese playbook. So, what she is doing looks like a lot of the mistakes that we just pointed out. What the CCP has done in the past few, I guess, generations, but definitely in the last year, in regards to coronavirus, different crackdowns, etc. So yeah, I mean, maybe you are being a conspiracy theorist, and I'm just saying directionally she's acting the same. But we're seeing this kind of bad policy and copycatting authoritarians from the West frequently. Like, this is the same action, and I'm not surprised. They're threatened by Bitcoin. Bitcoin, this tiny asset that is less than $1 trillion, and they're about to just print $1 trillion. So they could obviously crush Bitcoin, right? They're going to try to put in this little, petty crap in there. And then on the flip side, I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see how the Bitcoin industry has kind of reacted, because, this 2 lines is probably the most scrutinized 2 lines in the entire bill by far. Right. So that just shows these politicians, like, don't fuck with us. Like, we're going to be talking to Erica Rhodes from Southern California, who is a Democrat running against Brad Sherman in favor of Bitcoin and financial literacy. Right. And Bitcoiners from left and right, especially right-wing Bitcoiners, are coming in to support her because we're a single issue voting block, right? And I think, like you said, is yes, there's some challenges in the US, but the US also allows cryptocurrency voters and cryptocurrency holders to influence the election in ways. And I can't wait for Brad Sherman to lose that spot, because that's going to send ripples down the entire electorate. If you are firmly anti-Bitcoin, you will lose your job. Like, that's the stance where you can't fuck with it. Like, so I hope that does come true, and I hope that this voting bloc in the U.S. Continues to behave this way, and this voting bloc across the world. If they can't vote it, then they can vote with their dollar and vote with their feet and take advantage of jurisdictional arbitrage.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It goes to show that Bitcoiners are above average intelligence, and we are above average means now that the Bitcoin price, has gone up. A lot of us have made money just by hodling for years, and so I think that this is, it's just, what do I say? Bitcoin aligns incentives, and Bitcoin aligns these things that just happen to, go together, like backing Bitcoin friendly politicians and getting Brad Sherman out. We need to get Senator Warren out next if we can do that. But yeah, I think, speaking of Yellen and another Federal Reserve chairman, there is talk now that Powell could be losing his job very soon. So I think he comes up in September, October for his reappointment by Biden, and some people are talking that Lael Brainerd will be getting the nod instead of Powell getting his second term, 4-year term. That would be interesting, because Brainerd would give us a lot to talk about on this show. She is much more friendly to CBDCs and to digital dollars. And so we might see, if Brainerd does take over for Powell here by the end of the year, we could see a significant pivot in the CBDC landscape from the Fed.
Yeah, well, that would be a mistake if they try to crush the stable coins, because that's their real CBDC, in my opinion. But if they don't try to crush the stable coins, they will continue to see dominance. And I told David Hoffman this on POV Crypto last night, the same. I was like, I firmly believe that Tether will be more significant than the PBOC's digital currency forever. Like, the PBOC's digital currency will never reach where Tether is at that period of time at all. And I think Bitcoin will be more dominant than all above. So,
well, there's already a digital yuan, right? Tether offers a CNY Tether, and it only has like $5 million worth of CNY Tether. So it's not like these options don't already exist to use a digital version of these currencies. It's just that nobody wants to use them. That's why the USD Tether is by far the most dominant.
Yep. No, I agree. Well, Ansel, I think we got a little ranty here at the end, but this is what a lot of our listeners are tuning in for anyways. This is a great rip. How do we want to close it out? Yeah. Do you have any last words for the Bitcoiners out there?
Nope. I just want to thank Bitcoin Magazine for, letting me publish some of my stuff there, and stay tuned, because I'll be coming out with at least a couple articles a month. And so that should be some good macro geopolitical takes over there on Bitcoin Magazine.
Yeah, well, hey, Ansel is dropping an article every other week. We're going to be talking about his articles on here every other week. And we're going to be getting on some great guests and great panels on FedWatch as well. So stay tuned. I promise you guys, we'll be hitting once a week, consistently moving forward to the best of our abilities. Just be a little patient with us in the short term. But until then, follow me at CK_Snarks. Follow Ansel at Ansel Lindner. Follow Bitcoin Magazine at Bitcoin Magazine. 5-star reviews. You know the drill. Peace.